Okay, talking about the Lycoming system, and we want to maybe just do a quick little review of what we've been talking about here. Shall we start here?
Yes, please.
All right. So a quick little review for those of you who weren't sober yesterday. All right. So I think, are we all okay here? And, you speak up if we're not, about the basics of it. We've got exhaust goes through a Y gate, goes across the turbine spins compressor puts compressed air into the cylinder, and then that's the basic loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Real quick recap on the density controller and differential pressure.
Yeah, we're doing that though.
Okay.
We just want to do this. Now we're going to go back. So this is the controller for the turbocharger is the wastegate. Okay. And if we want to use the term, the exhaust takes the path of the least resistance. Well, there's resistance here across the turbine wheel, so it'd be much easier to go out the wastegate and leave. But we use the wastegate kind of like a throttle, if you will. It would have made a lot more sense if it was over here, but, like an engine. But it's not, it's over here. So the throttle is just a little backwards. When the throttle is open, the exhaust gas bypasses, and when the throttle is closed, it doesn't bypass the turbo. So remember the wastegate is controlled by spring pressure to which position?
Open and closed.
Closed is on, so open is off.
So open is off. So it takes oil pressure to close it. So spring pressure is going to open it, right? Okay. So if we kind of think about that, what would the default position be then?
Open.
Okay, so it'd be open or off. I was trying to think about that one. You always try and look at things, from an aviation safety standpoint. Default, where's default? Like, magnetos. If the switch breaks, default's to open, and then the magneto runs. I think that's just they didn't plan it that way, it just worked out. A lot of your carburetors are spring-loaded to go to wide open throttle. We're going to talk about propellers here shortly. A constant speed propeller that loses oil pressure is going to feather, which is what we want. So we want to go to the safest route. So can we kind of draw a line there and say the same thing? Would it be safer to lose your turbo or safer to have your turbo go full blast and always be on?
Lose it. You don't want to overboost your engine.
Okay, wouldn't want to overboost your engine. We're at very high altitude and we lose the turbo. Are we in trouble? If you have a single engine airplane, worst case scenario, if the turbo conks out, you could lose pressurization if you have a pressurized aircraft. If you don't, you're going to lose power and you'll be forced to descend to the altitude of which everybody else lives at. Normally aspirated engine, if you had to. So, not the end of the world. So, okay. So, we start the engine up. Oil pressure instantly comes in this way, fills this up, and wants to push this closed, but it will only do so if something downstream has blocked its path. Well, everything downstream has blocked its path. And in this case, we would have an idling engine, which means we'd have density controller, which is sensing temperature and pressure, and it's really looking to say, hey, I want max boost out of you. I want it's the full power thing. Give me full power. Well, we're at idling, so it's obviously going to be screaming for full power, but we're not going to give it any. The differential pressure controller, we're simply idling, so we have a very low amount of exhaust going across here. So we say the turbine isn't turning very fast, the compressor's not turning very fast. So this would be saying, yeah.
The density controller is measuring both temperature and pressure,
Yeah.
or just temperature?
Temperature, pressure.
Okay.
That's what makes up density. And the differential, though, may not be much of a differential here, well, at least starting up. So that will be closed, so the oil will back up. Yeah, of course it'd be closed because we'd have no turbo. So that would be closed, forcing this to back up like a toilet in the house that somebody pooed right there. Just trying to help you guys remember. Like a big turd in the line. You're going to back it up, and what happens? The toilet backs up, and it starts pushing back on this piston, draws this close, and it closes all the way. Forces the turbo to turn on. Less air through here, more air through here. Turbo turns on, starts spooling up. And this starts to build up right here, and it's going to say, wait a minute, you're idling. Huh?
Oh, no, I'm going with you.
All right. So we're idling, and then the differential pressure controller is going to hey, wait a minute. The turbo's kind of running kind of hard over here, and this line's starting to fill up. We're starting to get a bunch of upper deck pressure. But yet over here, it's a very low pressure. So we have this big difference between the two. Right? That's a problem. And this thing's going to be hypersensitive to any throttle changes and kind of hunt back and forth. It's not going to be nice. So differential controller is going to, well, you know, let's back off on the turbo a little bit. So it opens and starts bleeding off oil. Oil pressure starts bleeding off, which the spring pressure then starts pushing the piston back, starts opening up the wastegate, and then we get into more of an, I don't want to say equilibrium because you want more upper deck than you do manifold, but it gets to a point where it's manageable and everybody's happy. And we're going to stay right there, right? And then, you know, we add a little throttle, it'll adjust itself. These things are always adjusting. Just like your prop is constantly adjusting. And it's, you don't realize how much, like, a little off, how things are constantly in a state of adjustment until you start getting into digital readouts. Like my plane with the analog, it's like, man, the prop was just, bam, it's just nailed. If I put it at 2300, it's just right there. But now with my new gauge that is in 10 increments to not make you crazy, because if it was in ones, you would just, you know, nuts watching it. You can see it jump all over the place. So I'll just be flying along and it goes 2400, then it turns red, then it goes 29, 24, 29, 24, 29. I'm like, wow, just stop it. But, you know, you pull back, you push forward, you know, because I'm an imperfect machine and the air pressure. So the same thing here.
Distracting you from flying. Stop it.
Yeah. That's why I carry electrical tape. It just, that's fixed.
Cover the light, it's not there.
Yeah. That's how I fix the VCR clock. What's a VCR? Okay. We good?
Thank you.
Is that a good, okay. And we'll just continue this out. So we go out, we start taxiing, we get to the run-up area, we're going to run it up, we're going to bring it up to 1700 RPM, do mag check. When I bring up the pressure, or the RPM, I'm going to open this up a little bit more exhaust is going to come through. Turbo is going to spin faster, and it's going to allow it, because when I open this throttle, I'm going to have a drop on the manifold pressure. They're going to equalize. Upper deck and manifold would tend to equalize, and the differential pressure controller say, whoa, we're not supposed to be equal. You got to be a difference. So it's going to shut down, you know, more turbo. It starts getting this filled up a little bit until we get a differential that it likes, holds it right there. And then I think, you know, okay, take the center line, full throttle, right? I mean, yeah, man, we got all the exhaust going, and this is wide open. And so what's going to happen is this is all going to start spinning up really high, and we're going to get, this is going to go up to its limit, because remember the throttle's wide open, so you're not going to get a differential between, you're going to get a very small differential between these two. So the differential pressure controller is going to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm closing. We're supposed to have a difference, and I got nothing, very little, because you got the throttle wide open. But the differential or the density controller is going to take over, because at that point, it's going to, both of them are closed. The next one to open should be the density controller as we reach the red line of upper deck. Follow? Okay.
Which is upper deck, which is manifold?
Well, manifold is here.
Blue.
Oh.
Upper deck is here.
Wait.
Upper deck is
Wait,
blue,
wait.
manifold is green.
Okay.
Just think about
Before and
the
after.
regular engine that you guys ran out there. Where's the manifold pressure at?
After the throttle valve.
It's after the carburetor. Right after the carburetor's intake manifold, same thing.
Or you can just screw the legend.
Where?
Right there.
Oh.
Words are hard.
We left off yesterday
As temp.
as temperature increases. As temperature increases, air is less dense. There's less dense. So that is an issue. It's less dense. So in theory, we would need more air, correct? So the bellows expands because there's a bellows. We're talking about the density controller. The bellows expands. What's the bellows filled with? Okay.
Working.
Nitrogen in these. Blocking off oil. Blocking off oil from wastegate. Wastegate closes. Closes and more exhaust gases flow to turbine. Closes and more exhaust flows to turbine or turbo. As the temperature decreases, so it gets colder, the engine's going to need more or less air now.
Less.
Okay. So you got B. Oops, that should have been 7. There's your problem. 7, as temp decreases. As temp engine needs less air. Because your density went up. So you have higher density, so it needs less air. Bellows contracts. And does it bleed off oil or block oil?
Bleeds off.
Okay. Bleeds off oil. There, we'll just leave it at that. Wastegate. Opens or closes? Opens. Wastegate opens. And that means less exhaust gases to the turbo. So that was our density controller, yep. All right, let's talk about the differential. All right, differential pressure controller. That's the name, differential. I like it. They name them things that make sense. You got a density controller. What does it care about?
Density.
Density. And you got differential. Cares about?
Differential.
Differential. So one side connected to upper deck, other side connected to manifold pressure. So one side.
It's supposed to be 3 eyes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's the. One side connected to upper deck. That's turbo outlet, if you're wearing an orange shirt. And one side connected to manifold pressure. While you're writing that, I'll just fill in some dead space here, silence. Is anybody else bothered when you go someplace like to a restaurant or something and it's like, so if you need anything, my name is Jeff.
Yes. I'm never going to call him by his name.
Well, what if I don't need anything? What is your name? I've never met anybody with a conditional name before. It's like, but I always wait till I leave. So I'm like, guy, it's a conditional name. My wife always knows what I'm talking about. She goes, shut up. What?
It could be somebody else's name entirely. So they're like, excuse me, Jeff? It's a different server.
No, the point is, if you need anything, my name is. If I don't need something, then what is your name?
It always bugged me.
But I wouldn't say that. They'll spit in my food.
When people would actually call me by my name, like, thank you, Tobias. Don't say that.
My name is Waiter.
Yeah,
I'm not your friend.
I'm not your friend.
How dare you read my name tag?
Oh, man. Boy, this is really getting off topic. Are you guys caught up?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Then I won't waste your time. Spring pressure holds valve normally closed. Spring pressure holds valve normally closed. Holds valve normally closed. Which is NC, right? Normally closed. So what do I mean by this valve is normally closed?
That's a valve for oil pressure. Right?
That is this right here, normally closed.
Yep.
So it, okay, and if I don't give it any input, it stays Close. It takes an input to open it. Okay, I wouldn't do that part. 4.
Wouldn't that make it default to have the turbo
On,
at all
yeah.
times?
Mhm.
Or I guess not all times, but
Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah, okay.
but isn't it naturally at the wastegate open? No, close at the wastegate.
Wastegate's
Wastegate's-
open.
Naturally.
Normally open.
Oh, naturally open.
Naturally
So as soon as you turn the engine on, there's gonna be a vacuum. And so that's gonna then open this,
Vacuum.
open that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a differential, and so we'll go back to
Okay,
opening
so
up the wastegate.
The wastegate, the turbo is off, the
Off.
differential.
Okay, so I look at it this way. Sitting in the engine and it's completely off. All right? And if you look at it, the wastegate's open.
Yep.
The density controller is closed.
Uh-huh.
And the differential pressure is closed. So if I could add oil pressure, the wastegate would close.
Ah, okay.
The only reason why it's open is because of the spring, but everything in the system is set up to tell it should be closed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once it gets the oil pressure, it closes.
But
to
it
with the rest of the
can't
system.
close, yeah, because it doesn't have oil pressure yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So,
density is saying you need to close. Differential, you need to close. Wastegate's going, I would, but I have no oil pressure, and the damn spring is keeping me from doing it. So the second you give it oil pressure, it's going to start closing, unless one of the two controllers start to open up.
Which turn the turbo on.
well, I would,
Okay.
so I was thinking of the turbo as like, you don't want it on until you start like, no, you don't want it on like at rest, for instance.
Like at idle.
At idle.
Like, yeah, just sitting there, you
So-
wouldn't want it on.
Say you turn it on and you're idling, isn't it gonna build up enough oil pressure?
Okay,
Close it and turn on?
let's talk about that, because this is a good point.
Yeah.
You don't need it,
Yeah,
but the engine wasn't designed to idle, it's designed to operate.
oh, okay.
And so both of the controllers are kind of stupid, and they're not tied to an RPM, so they don't know the difference.
Okay.
They're just, all they know is they know the
On and off.
The density is, I am not happy about this because I don't have enough pressure, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, we're idling. How am I supposed to know that? You know? Okay.
I'm
And,
just not.
and it's a grumpy old man.
Give me that food.
And then you have the differential, which in a very short period of time is going to start working because you're at idle. It's go, wow, look at all this pressure over here, and I don't have any over there. So this is too much. So it's already going to be screaming about it at idle.
Something.
If something, I don't know, what the hell. What am I on? 4, there we go. If pressure differential from UDC, which stands for
Upper deck.
upper deck, UDP, sorry.
Oh.
I don't know what the C is. Upper deck pressure. Ultimate, upper deck pressure. If pressure differential from upper deck pressure to manifold, that's ratio there, upper deck to manifold, exceeds a set limit. What happens? Valve opens, bleeding off oil pressure. Valve opens. Bleeding off oil pressure. And opening wastegate. It is usually set about 2 to 4 inches of mercury difference. And I'll make this point here. This prevents bootstrapping. I was going to say that. Bootstrap Bill. That's right. He's the guy who invented it.
What is bootstrapping?
Well,
You look like bootstraps.
yeah, lift you up by your bootstraps. It is a turbo sensitivity issue.
Oh, like the scavenging kind of? Going back and forth.
Bobby hunting. Yeah. Or you could look at it, because you want to kind of go with the terms, like where do they come up with this term bootstrapping? Well, it's, it's to lift yourself up by your bootstraps, so it's a self thing. So what that would be is that you crack the throttle so far, and if all you had was the density controller that was saying, hey, I want, all the power, 40 inches, whatever it's set for. So you fill up the upper deck with 40 inches, and so you have 40 inches, so you open the throttle a little bit. It's going to bleed down for a second as you open it, and then it's going to go through the cylinder, and then that's going to produce more power, more exhaust. The exhaust is going to start driving the turbine faster, and because it's open this far, this is going to build this up more. Now more air is going to go through until these two start to equalize. When it did that, it drove the more power to the engine, which made the prop go faster, which RPM went up. So all right, so you got to pull it back a little bit. Now you pull it back too far, and it goes too, you just start going back and forth. Start hunting for this.
So it's basically just like turning it into a runaway engine.
Sure, yeah.
Bootstrapping is like a dampener, if you will. It's
Yeah, I could see.
absorbing some of that.
Kind of like a dampener, but it does it in a different way, but sure.
Okay.
All right, so operation. Operation. Let's see if this is right. So at part throttle, so see density controller is closed. Why is it probably closed?
Probably.
Well, yeah. I would assume it is.
This is the spring.
Density controller.
Oh.
Doesn't have enough density.
Yeah.
Wants more turbo.
More.
Right? Wants more turbo. What's differential controller doing?
Closed.
Is it closed? So the differential.
That part throttle would be open.
So the differential controller senses the difference between what?
Manifold and up and down.
Okay. Upper deck pressure to manifold pressure. So it senses the difference between those two. And due to the large difference, is that happy or not happy?
Not happy.
Yeah, large difference across throttle plate. And due to the large difference across the throttle plate, yeah, it does that. So it doesn't like that big difference, right? It wants some difference, not a lot. How much?
Not a lot.
Give me a number.
2 to 4.
2 to 4.
2 to 4.
All right. So, see, differential controller senses the difference between upper deck to manifold, and due to the large difference across the throttle plate, will open and bleed off some oil, which does what to the
Which
wastegate?
Opens the wastegate,
Okay, opens
turning off the turbo a little more.
wastegate, turbo off-ish. So shutting it down a little bit. And that helps to prevent what? Helps prevent bootstraps.
Turbo off-ish.
Doesn't turn it off, it just slows it down a little bit. Better run in a room. And helps prevent bootstrapping. Okay? As throttle is opened, what happens?
The pressure the pressure equalizes. The pressure differential is unhappy and closes, forcing the wastegate to close.
Okay? As throttle's open, pressure drop is reduced. The pressure drop is reduced. meaning the difference between the manifold and upper deck gets a little bit too close, starts to equalize. Pressure drop is reduced. Hang on, trying to figure out what a width here. We'll go with this. Pressure drop is reduced, which closes differential and adds turbo, right? Try to abbreviate a little bit. Let's see, at full throttle, the differential does what? Does it want more turbo, less turbo, happy, sad?
More turbo because there's less differential.
At
Yep.
full throttle?
At full throttle.
They are more equal to each other, so it is
The differential
unhappy.
wants more.
Okay, so the differential is now open or closed?
Open,
Mm-mm.
closed.
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 Closed. It wants more. And the density,
That's open.
Less.
okay, does the controlling. Can't say if it's open or closed because it's going to be regulating. It's probably going to be open, close, open, close, open, close. Or at a spot where it's just bleeding a little. You know, like I said, they're not binary, ones and zeros. It can be partial. Bleed a little bit more. Let's see. Well, that's that in a nutshell. I have some problems here.
Hold on.
Problems. A whole bunch of them. Throttle sensitivity. You have to be careful what you say around it or it gets all butthurt. You're a nice throttle. You answered all of your oral questions so nicely. Throttle sensitivity. What do I got here? I don't want to write all this because we're going to run out of time today. So I wrote turbo system responds slowly. So pilot opens throttle, which establishes a new differential pressure. The differential controller senses the change and repositions the bleed. I almost have to go through this a little bit slower, maybe with the picture.
You're saying response slowly.
Okay.
Turbo lag.
There's
Yep.
a lag.
Okay.
So open the valve here. Open the throttle,
Full throttle,
which establishes a new differential between the two.
less difference.
Okay, less difference. The differential controller senses that. It says, hey,
Closes.
Wait a minute.
yeah, we're behind the curve here, so it's going to
Close.
close. All right. So the new bleed valve setting changes oil flow to the wastegate and starts to close this off. All right. And that takes it and starts to increase the turbo speed. Well, the increased turbo speed increases turbocharging, which increases upper deck pressure. And when this increases, this is a set orifice. What happens on the other side of that?
It stays the same.
So you have higher pressure here. What happens to the pressure here?
Higher pressure.
It's just an orifice, a fixed orifice. It's going to try and equalize. So this pressure goes up. So now this pressure's up. So if this pressure's up, what do we have in the engine?
More power.
More power. So the prop's going to speed up. Now you just passed the RPM that you wanted. So what do you got to do?
Let it off.
Now you got to go back the other way. This causes the differential controller to move and starts the process all over again until it's in equilibrium. So it's going to go and go back and forth, back and forth. So
Small adjustment and then leave it.
yeah, so
Let it
that's
figure itself out and make another small adjustment.
just one of the issues. Let's see. Throttle sensitivity. We talked about bootstrapping. Let's see. If the differential controller was not operating, any increase in throttle would cause an increase in turbo speed. Does that make sense to you? Back to this. So if we didn't have this,
Yeah.
and density controller was really only just controlling the maximum amount, then I'd say any change in throttle would cause the turbo to speed up. If I'm at 65% power and I go to 70, and this right here is closed because I just want more.
Because it's just not going to hold it back.
So an increase in throttle increases the engine, which increases the exhaust, which increases the turbo, which increases the airflow, which increases what you just did. It adds to what you just did. And you're like, oh, dang it. So this increases the upper deck pressure, increases horsepower, RPM, which increases exhaust gas, which increases the turbo speed, which just causes a chain reaction and it just kind of keeps going.
Run
So,
away.
huh?
Run away. and-
Run away.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll do that so much,
Until
but
high RPM, and then the density controller
Yeah.
would take charge.
Yeah.
that eventually it would. So, okay, wrong button. This button. This button. Okay. Bootstrapping.
Let's say that the density controller gets stuck in the closed position.
Then you'd have to be very careful with your manifold pressure, and you would control it. You'd pull back, start closing the manifold pressure valve, but you'd probably be fighting it the whole way. Cycle every little, you'd start wandering this way, then you'd open a little bit and start keep wandering that way, wandering this way. So just you'd be all right. Overboost. Overboost is when manifold pressure exceeds manufacturer limits. It can happen due to the time it takes components to change and reach full throttle. You know, if you set a throttle setting and things kind of settle in, you look over, ooh, now I'm overboosting, so you don't want to do that. It can happen due to time it takes components to react to throttle changes, right, because it happens kind of slow. Can happen with manually controlled systems, obviously, if you're not paying attention to it. Can happen with fast inputs. Remember, these are not cars. They were not designed for
More.
rapid. Yeah, you got to be very careful with that. So, and then there's overshoot. A momentary overboost. So that's just a very much. You can really see that in constant speed propellers when you have a cold engine. So you take it out, you know, you're going to fly it the first time for the day and it's cold oil. So you take it out, you warm it up. But of course, you just can't get the oil as warm as you want it. So I can hear it all the time because my hangar is right next to the runway where people are taking off. And you hear it. And you hear the RPM go, whoa, and it just comes right back in. You're like, yeah, you way overshot. And then you can hear the propeller kind of catching up and pulling the RPM back. In a little bit, sounds pretty bad. I can hear it in my own plane. I try to be very careful, but you can every now and then I can hear it. I'm like, oops, I was a little too much on that throttle. So that's a momentary overboost due to system lag.
So even on your naturally aspirated aircraft, it'll still shoot up over, and then because the prop.
The prop is what holds its
back.
RPM.
And so yours is a constant or a variable, or yes.
Constant speed prop.
Yes, yeah. So it'll.
Variable pitch, same thing.
Yeah. So it'll just go and then it'll catch.
Yeah, we'll talk about in the weeks to come, but basically my RPM so on a fixed pitch propeller, right? You guys, you're running,
Yeah.
okay, if you had the right combination, we'll take a 150 with the right engine, right prop. In the type certificate data sheet, it says what the static RPM is. Static RPM is I take it out, put my feet on the brakes and go wide open throttle. It's going to go to a specific RPM. It has to be between that range. That range is a long way from the red line. A long way. It's up here. Red line's down here. On a constant speed prop, the engine will keep going. The only thing that stops it at red line is the pitch of the propeller. So in the propeller, you have your pitch stops, but those usually aren't set to hold it there. And so then you have to adjust the governor so that the governor does it. But it takes time for the governor to react because you'll see that it's got flyweights in it, and it has to send the oil pressure through the oil transfer collar up to the prop and then push on the prop dome and then change the pitch. It takes a little while, especially with cold oil. So, all right, moving on. Variable pressure controller. pressure controller. This is used on the TIO 541. It replaces the density and differential controller. You can almost see it coming, can't you? Let's take a look at a picture. Lycoming variable pressure controller. You don't like that?
No color. Yeah, there's no color.
I know, sorry.
Nope.
Oh, that's a little better.
That's a different one though.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, it's not too
So let's just, yeah, it's not too bad. I could feel like I'd get somebody some
Actually
color
see what I'm
crayons.
looking at, yep.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Let's make heads or tails of this. Here we go. Turbine, compressor, exhaust, wastegate actuator, engine. All right, that's all looking familiar, right? Okay, we got the engine, we got exhaust coming out. We go to a Y-gate. We have a wastegate. When it's open, goes out. When it's closed, it goes across turbine wheel. And then out. Same?
Yep.
Compressor comes in. Got upper deck pressure. Let me see, compressor comes in. We've got air intake manifold here. We got this going out to the sonic venturi for cabin pressurization with the optional pressure switch. And then it's not like this is going anywhere. It's just showing you that this is the sensor off that. So it probably wouldn't have this big hose going over to somewhere else like that. All right, so, but this is really nice. We can just read that. The spring and the vacuum keep controller servo valve on seat, allowing oil pressure to build up and close wastegate when deck pressure increases as a result of servo valve is raised, lowering oil. Okay, that's just not worth. This is what's kind of cool right here is a cam that is linked to
Throttle.
the throttle. So it's taking some throttle inputs and adding to it. So it kind of now is starting to sense what's going on with the engine. It's not completely blind about this.
And it's smart.
Yeah, it's a smart controller. All right, let's see what I got over here. Same thing, just different.
I like that.
You like this one better?
Yeah.
Okay, so I do too. So we've gotten rid of the differential and density, and we've added a variable controller. Other than that, I mean, that looks pretty much the same. But what did we add over here?
Pressure relief valve.
Yeah,
Blow-off valve.
blow-off valve. Is it connected to anything?
No.
Safety valve. When this doesn't do
Just
its...
got spring.
Yep, just got a big spring right there.
Plate.
Okay, sonic venturi goes to
Cabin.
cabin pressurization. Yeah,
What are the positives of cabin pressurization?
it's huge.
Altitude.
You can go up much higher in altitude. You don't need oxygen. You're more comfortable. Fly higher. Go fast.
Yeah.
When you go on a pressurized.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just wondering.
I mean, the short answer keeps you from dying.
Yeah.
Death is the alternative. Does anybody know what the oxygen requirements? Well, I guess there aren't any in pressurization because it's not like you're wearing a
Gas mask.
not like you're wearing oxygen at 40,000 feet. So
Isn't it like with two, like, or it's like a pilot, it's like a requirement above a certain flight level. If there's only two pilots, one has to wear the mask at all times or something like that?
I'm not even sure.
It's 25,000.
25,000. A pilot is wearing an oxygen mask.
If you have, you either have to have a quick done oxygen mask, or one pilot has to be wearing it. And
Okay.
Most of the time, they just have quick dons.
Yeah, they do, and those are pretty cool. You guys are gonna learn all about them. How they one hand and hit a button and it
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
sucks on your face like an alien monster.
That's awesome.
Why do they
Okay.
still have the bullshit?
You okay? What?
The army mask that we have.
Oh.
is bullshit. They don't seal for crap. You tell me.
Okay.
Got an automatic one. You just push the little.
Yes, you joined the army, would you expect?
Yeah, what did you expect?
Oh, man, still.
Lowest man seller.
Still,
You joined the Air Force.
Hey,
so
not
it's
anymore.
all
You
around
see
the
the
place.
weapon what the army getting? Boy, maybe you want to think about realizing.
Operates in the same way.
46.8.
You guys got a test tomorrow, and I got so far to go. In the same way a density controller. Controller works. But uses a cam linked to the throttle. Cam linked the throttle to vary pressure on a spring within the controller for optimum upper deck pressure. Cam linked to throttle to vary pressure on a spring. Within the controller, I don't need to write that, on a spring for optimum upper deck pressure. Upper deck pressure at a given throttle setting.
So are these like calibrated?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you are not supposed to mess with these unless you have very specific instructions, and it's like adjusting continental fuel injection systems. Don't.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Lightning.
Really?
Or I'm having a stroke. And if you knew what my blood pressure was, you would really not rule that one out.
You wanna check it out?
Um,
Yeah, blood pressure.
I don't need to really go into this anymore. I believed in what we need to do right there. And then I'm going to throw this one out here.
Now I'm looking out the window.
The slope controller. To be honest with you, and I told you guys this as we were getting into this, that even within the systems, sometimes there's a significant lack of information. Sometimes one book explains it, and you're like, wait a minute, you're explaining exactly what I just did, and now you're calling it something different. So I can't even believe all of the stuff that I'm reading exactly with the data they're giving me. I'm just going to tell you there is a thing called a slope controller. It's similar to the differential. Similar to a differential. And how do I know that? Very simple. For a fact, it is connected across the throttle plate. That means it's sensing what?
Differential.
Differential. But they call it a slope controller. So then I try and find, okay, I want to know what is the difference between a differential controller and a slope controller. Good luck with that. So then I think, all right, what do I do next?
Is it like a geometry thing?
Then I think about the fact that
Difference?
it's not on your test, so maybe if I just teach you what's on the test at this point and really help you focus in on what's the main thing, that would be better off than trying to get into some nuance. You're like, okay, what do I do with that information? You don't have to worry about it. So we just talked, okay, so that's the Lycoming system.
That's easy.
That's good.
That really was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We just covered basically two systems. So system one had two controllers, which were the
The pressure differential and the differential
Density.
and the
Yeah,
wastegate.
and the density, okay, and the wastegate. They all have the wastegate.
Yeah.
And we talked about the fact that oil comes into the wastegate.
Yep.
You've got to block it in order to push on the wastegate to close it.
Close it.
Anything downstream that opens, and they're in parallel, so if this one opens or that one opens, you're going to bleed off oil and the wastegate's going to close. So then we just moved on to, from the differential density to the variable pressure controller. So it's got one component inside that works like the density and a cam on the top that helps it act like the differential.
So the what is it called?
And the slope controller is just another name for a differential.
The variable pressure controller always wants full power, but the throttle is telling it no.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, we could say that. Okay.
Like you said, it works like the
Yeah. And I didn't write this in, but we can obviously add it's got a pressure relief valve because we can see it.
yeah.
Now maybe we can go back and read this and see if it makes just a little bit of sense. So spring and vacuum keep controller servo valve on the seat. So valve on the seat would tell me no bleed, allowing oil pressure to build up, I'm right, and close wastegate. When deck pressure increases, as a result, servo valve is raised, lowering oil pressure and regulating the wastegate. Operation is continuous and reoccurring. That was a whole lot of stuff to say that it opens and closes, wasn't it? But it is connected directly to sensing. What is it sensing?
Intake pressure.
And it's sensing
This,
the
there's the,
upper deck.
so it only senses upper deck. So all of this right here, upper deck will lift it or put it on its seat. That is it. So,
Spring, or the cam adjusts the spring.
but the spring over here is, and if you think about it, now we've gotten rid of a whole nother controller. We've gotten rid of diaphragms and springs and all that stuff. And we just said, well, wait a minute. We can plot this out at this much throttle. If we opened it this far, the wastegate would do this, and that would work out just right. It would give us this kind of differential. So it's just more of a mechanical way of doing it. And so it's just pre-plotted out.
Would you say these are more foolproof than the other ones, or just no? There's no difference?
Well, because here you're kind of taking away the density controller, right?
Yeah,
No,
you've
no,
got-
density's right here. You're taking away the differential.
Oh, okay.
The differential is mechanical.
The differential's mechanical. And I think about which one would I rather have. I'd probably rather have the other one, I think, even though it's two controllers, because I can just see the problems with trying to rig this. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta rig that. I gotta rig that. The other one just bolt on and bolt off. So, all right, what do we got?
Break time.
Break time.
So I get to stay out there.